it's important and you need to read it and understand it before you participate. Also, the code of conduct is also important. We like things to be polite and friendly and courteous here. So meeting tips, you've probably seen this during the week. You know, if you're in person, you can use the Meet Echo Lite if you want to. You need to keep your audio and video off. If you're remote, use a headset. And you need to sign in. So you need to sign into Meet Echo so that we can record that you were here. It helps us with things like when we request a room, they go back and they look at how many people were here last time. So we get the right size room. So if you don't sign in, we'll get a little itty bitty room next time and you'll be all squished in. All right. So here's our agenda. The beginning is the normal SAAG agenda. We have Damian Miller here who's going to give us SSH overview talk. And then we'll have a little bit of time for open mic at the end. Any agenda bashing? Okie dokie. So working group changes since IETF 121. We had 2 BOFs this time, a Nasser BOF and an SKEX BOF. How do we say that? SKEX, is that the way you want it? Okay, cool. We also in the last, since the last meeting, we rechartered IPsec-ME. We're still in the process of rechartering lamps. That's a long story. We won't go into it here. We've also done a little bit of working group chair swapping around. Nothing too exciting. If you're interested in helping us out, you can let us know if you're interested in being a working group chair. You can always do document shepherd work. It's a nice way to learn about how the process works, document shepherd stuff does. You can do errata processing, everybody's favorite. And then you can help us when we have BOFs or sec dispatch or things like that. All right, working group summaries. If you have sent us a message on the list, we're good. If you want to come to the mic and talk about it, now's the time.
Maybe quick update. I haven't signed it. Okay.
That's fine.
Okay. Quick update on OAuth. We have 2 sessions this time, not 3. Interesting work related to EU identity work. We have 3 drafts that the EU identity group are waiting for: status list, SDJOT, and SDJOT VC. The first one is progressing well. I think the SDJOT is with you already, Deb. The status list should be coming soon too.
Should be coming soon.
Like a few more weeks. Need to we need to start a wake group last call again, the second one, and then the Shepherd write up and all this stuff. So
that's the SDJOT. That's the VC.
No. That's the status list, right?
Oh, I see. Okay. Yes.
And the VC is still a little bit more work, right?
More work
yeah. Other interesting work, OAuth 2.1, is progressing. Still more work, but it's good progress there. Other interesting work. Job profile. There's a biz for the existing RFC because of some issues around vulnerabilities that were found. So it was interesting work there. Transaction tokens, identity chaining. So that's going to be tomorrow. If you're interested in OAuth and any of those topics, show up and let's talk about those.
Cool. Thank you. Anyone else? Kitten met this time for the first time in a minute or 2, right? Okay, so these are the related non-sec area activities. I don't know whether anybody wants to make any comments on these. DMARC is now closed, I think, but just like yesterday. TikTok as well. So, is he coming to the mic? No, he's going to go sit down. Had me worried there for a minute. Okay. So we also started up a non-working group mailing list. I think this probably happened quite a minute ago. So it's the XKEX or the SKEX, sorry, mailing list. It's going to be 180 spot. Oh, God.
Sorry, just on a non-working group mailing list, not in SEC, but probably interesting to a bunch of people in this area. The WebBot Auth mailing list, there was a side meeting on Monday morning, and the list was just created like Tuesday or something like that. And this is for authentication of web bots and figuring out what that actually even means.
Okay, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
now.
so I think technically it's under art. But yeah, that's started up this week, and anybody who's interested in authentication and delegation, there's going to be a lot of good conversations there.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So this is SEC events work. These two drafts will be put together eventually, and we'll AD sponsor them when that happens. So there were so SEC dispatch and dispatch were combined. All dispatch we decided would not continue, but the ART ADs and us and WIT decided to do our dispatches together. So SEC dispatch and dispatch were like side by side in the session. It turns out there were 3 things that were presented. The first one came in as an art area dispatch item. Turns out I think it's actually more SEC than it is art. So we will be looking at this more later to see what we want to recommend there. The other 2 are very definitely art items, and so they were they'll be discussed. The art area ADs will talk about them. Errata processing. Did you really do this?
So since the processing is a somewhat manual process of me walking up to the desk of the RFC editor and helping me get the numbers, and I was a little late this time, so I didn't get the numbers in, but I'll put them in for next time. So we're not off the hook yet. We're still in a pretty bad shape, but I want to thank everybody who started last week in reporting many erratas. I haven't gotten around to clearing them out yet, but your effort is appreciated, and I will catch up in the next week or so.
These are just SEC area pointers where you can find stuff. Oh yeah, well, so if you're a working group chair, you automatically get added to the sector reviewer list where you can review drafts before they come to the telechat. We meet usually on Tuesdays and we get lunch, so super exciting. So these are the sector reviews that have happened since Dublin. It's what happens is a lot of documents want to have their security considerations reviewed either ahead of time or before they come to IETF last call or the telechat. And so this makes the quality of the drafts better before they get to us. And this is just how well we've been doing. And how well the drafts are. So this is actually not bad. I mean, ready is like 50% practically, right? So that's pretty good. Well, maybe not. I don't know. It's better than not. Ooh, so we have Damian Miller to give us, so we figured that SSH is an important protocol, right? So we thought it would be a good idea to have Damian come and talk about SSH. So we give him the clicker. You have to stand on the little square.
Oh,
Look at that.
stand on the X. Is an
Stand
anvil,
on the X.
Is an anvil going to drop on my head?
No,
Um,
only in Acme.
Look in the late.
Only in Acme do you have stuff drop on your head.
Rim shot. Hello. So Deb asked me to give a talk on SSH, its role in the world and its role amongst the IETF standards. This is the output of that. I should start with an excuse/disclaimer. This is all my perspective. I'm bound to make mistakes. Don't hate me for them. Okay.
Look at
All
that.
So I guess I'll try to introduce SSH from a couple of different angles, and kind of like the parable of the blind people feeling their way around the elephant. Maybe we'll come to some sort of shared truth about what it is. I'll start with this, which is, if you put a gun to my head and asked me to tell you what SSH is in a sentence, I'd probably say something like this. It's not very deep and probably familiar to most of you. I think those of us of a certain age would be familiar with the Berkeley R commands from which sort of came out, I think, in the mid-80s. RSH, RLogin, RXEC, RCP. SSH basically provides the same user interface as the Berkeley R commands 4 decades later, and I think that's fairly striking. That these things obviously filled an ecological niche, and they back then, and they're still fulfilling that niche today. SSH is a protocol suite. It is at the bottom of it is a encrypted transport protocol, symmetrically encrypted, and a set of sub protocols that run over it. Initially, a key agreement and parameter negotiation phase. It's quite straightforward. That arrives with a set of parameters such as key exchange algorithm, symmetric cipher, message authentication code, etc. A key exchange sub-protocol, there's a range of them, mod P Diffie-Hellman, elliptic curve Diffie-Hellman, a number of post-quantum ones, or post-quantum transitional ones are all in there. So that key agreement protocol executes, keys the symmetric transport, and then the rest of the connection is encrypted. At that point, typically a user authentication sub-protocol starts. This is where you get the opportunity to enter your password, challenge response. You could use public key authentication, that's supported as well. Kerberos/GSS API. That all fits in there, and that's quite an extensible sub-protocol to new authentication methods. Finally, once all that's done, is the actual usable user-facing part of the protocol, which is the connection protocol. It provides basically bidirectional pipe abstractions over the transport. This is what your keystrokes go over when you use an SSH session. This is what your data goes over if you're forwarding something over an SSH session. It's possible for a single transport to carry multiple of these connections, and that has various uses within the protocol. The sort of most obvious of which is you can have more than one shell or command execution session going at once, but SSH protocol, or the SSH user interface, for a long time has supported forwarding other protocols over it, such as TCP connections. So if you want to have more than one thing happening at once, you need the ability to multiplex stuff over it. And then atop that are a set of services that sit well, I mentioned a few of the things that sit on top of it already, but in turn, SSH is a building block for other protocols. Git uses it as a transport. rsync uses it as a transport. There's part of the SSH suite are a number of file transfer systems like SCP and SFTP, and just uncountable amounts of user-written automation shell scripts and similar and cron jobs and everything else that runs over SSH quite happily. I guess wrapping up the sort of feeling our way around the elephant, SSH is a collection of standards. These are the core of them. They sort of define the basic structure of the protocol. They've been added to over the years since then. I think now there's about 24 RFCs that either extend SSH or use SSH in different protocols. But these are the sort of the initial ones. They came out in about 2006. SSH these days is everywhere. It very quickly supplanted unencrypted remote access. I think there was a chart of NetFlow data that I saw in the early 2000s where Telnet and RSH sort of went down a cliff as SSH was kind of ramping up a cliff. So it basically displaced, supplanted unencrypted remote access quite quickly. These days it's completely ubiquitous. It's available on every general purpose operating system, installed by default, at least for the client side on most of them. Not all of them have the server enabled by default. In my very biased opinion, it's critical internet infrastructure. It's the last resort, at least before you get in the car and plug it, with the serial cable for accessing network infrastructure and servers. And for most of it, or for many of us, it's the first resort as well. And as I mentioned, just unfathomable amounts of infrastructure are built on top of it as well. People write scripts with it all the time that just kind of happily do their thing. It's also a building block for other IETF protocols. There's a netconf profile for SSH, and there's a draft for syslog over SSH as well, at least. So here's a brief sort of potted history of SSH. I'm certainly going to get things wrong because I wasn't there for all of it. I guess I've mentioned the Berkeley R tools at the beginning, but SSH as a thing started in the mid-90s when Tatu Lonen created, and maybe Tero, I don't know whether you were there at the very beginning or whether you came for SSH 2, I'm not sure of the chronology, created SSH version 1. And again, the user interface is basically unchanged. It is a command that you type or your shell script executes for you, and it gives you a pipe to the other end, safely and confidentially. By the end of the 90s, SSH version 1 was definitely showing its age. It made there's a lot of assumptions in the protocol. Some of them, terrible in retrospect. For example, it used CRC32 as a message authentication code, which is just cryptographically unthinkable these days. But also it baked certain assumptions about cryptographic algorithm fairly deep into the protocols. So it only allowed RSA keys for public key for users or hosts. And that was problematic because if you remember the dark old days of the early 2000s, RSA was still under patent at the time and had a lot of concerns around it. So by the end of the 90s, there was an active standardization process for SSH version 2. Getting to RFCs took quite a while longer, I think 2006, and a lot of flame wars, but we got there in the end. With the initial tranche of RFCs done, the SSH working group concluded, and that was a bit of a problem because the IANA registries were marked for standards action or the thing that requires a working group anyway. So it was very difficult. It was moderately difficult, at least, to get to make further updates to the SSH protocol and get new algorithms written because there was no active working group. You have to find your way through another one. And if you weren't familiar with the IETF process, that wasn't such an easy thing to navigate. I include myself in that. Around the middle of last decade, the Kernel working group started up and was very active in modernising the protocol. They standardised a lot of stuff that happened in the community in the intervening years. So there's a very active community of open source and other implementers who have done a lot of work to experiment, introduce new algorithms, new key agreement schemes, etc., using the SSH protocol's pretty generous extension mechanisms. And the Kernel Working Group codified a bunch of those, wrote a bunch of RFCs, and then, as far as I'm aware, shut down. So from 2018 to 2024, we were in the situation of no obvious active working group again. But at the beginning of last year, the INA policy was changed to expert review. So getting code points allocated was much easier. And the SSH maintenance working group started up. So things are kicking off once again. This is kind of some of the stuff that I mentioned, that there's an active community. These are some of the protocol changes and extensions that have come out of that community. First, I'm not going to go through them all. These are just the ones that enjoy fairly, some degree of cross-implementation support. So they're not just one thing that any one project cooked up and ships by themselves. But I guess the broad theme here is that the community is active in the cryptographic modernisation of the protocol. SSH is, I like to joke that SSH is one of the 3 protocols that staggered out of the 1990s, along with TLS and IPsec, and all of them have had to have significant upgrades in the time since. I should have mentioned it earlier, but SSH is boring cryptography. There's no multi-party post-quantum zero-knowledge threshold signatures in this protocol. It's very basic. It's key agreement, it's symmetric cryptography, and it's public key signatures. So there's nothing super fancy there, and generally the community has taken off-the-shelf algorithms and plug them in. So no, people aren't out there inventing new cryptography and shoving it into SSH. They're taking things that have had some degree of analysis and research by the cryptographic community. I guess I should add that the SSH community is quite concerned about quantum computer attack and store now, decrypt later. SSH traffic by its nature is often administrative, high value, easily discerned on a network. So, we don't want it to be attacked. There's been post-quantum transitional key agreement available in SSH since 2019, when Tiny SSH added streamlined in true prime, hybrid X25519, and OpenSSH made that the default key exchange in 2022. So for recent-ish operating systems, your traffic is safe against post-quantum attack, or quantum attack, I should say. So the SSH working group has started up now. This is my perspective on the working group. I definitely don't speak to it. And its charter is to largely to standardise stuff which is already out there and has wide implementation support. So really biasing on the and running code part of the sort of IETF credo. That includes some very widely supported authenticated encryption modes, some protocol modifications that have been added to prevent particular attacks, and things like the SSH agent sub-protocol, which has been very widely supported for over 20 years, but it never actually gotten standardised. A more rancorous part of the SSH maintenance working group is standardising post-quantum key agreement, but broadly speaking, there's quite a large backlog of work in the working group. Like there's years of stuff and a limited number of people to look at it, and everything gets discussed, of course. So I guess where to next? This is my wish list. Other people have their own wish lists, but I get to stand up here and tell you mine. So the SFTP file transfer protocol has been around for 25-ish years. There was a series of drafts, but the second version 3, which is confusingly draft 02, is the one that is most widely implemented. Sarah shaking his head. I think getting some standard around that and getting it modernised for 2025 is, I think, something which is important to do. Getting a post-quantum signature scheme, maybe hybrid, maybe not. SSH isn't. There's not a lot of long-lived keys in the SSH protocol, but there's some use cases where some signatures would be good. Post-quantum cryptography is a bit of a beauty contest at the moment. There's a lot of algorithms. Everyone's got their favourite. There is, I think, a legitimate engineering argument that we should have some diversity among underlying math or cryptographic problems. So at the moment, the two that are widely used, or the one that is the NIST standard, MLChem, and the one that is widely used in SSH, in true prime, both lattice problems, structured lattice problems, having a different sort of a fundamental basis to a key agreement would be useful. NIST, obviously reading my mind since I wrote the slides, has mentioned that they're going to standardise HQC as a code-based chem. There's also a fair bit of community interest in classic McAleese. I think because it has such a long provenance and is a fairly hard mathematical problem underpinning it. There's also a fairly widely supported certificate format that's specific to SSH, quite popular among tech companies in particular. Getting that documented would be useful too. And that's the last slide. So that's a bunch of OpenSSH implementers in front of the Telnet Cafe. So. This is where you bombard me with questions.
Questions, yeah.
Or comments.
Hi, Sean Turner. Thanks for this great history. I remember some of it, not all of it. And then you answered my questions because I wanted to know whether you were going to go down the hybrid, pit hole for signatures, but it looks like you're going to at least debate it, so that's good. And I was going to ask about the certificate format, but did that mean your certificate format or an X509 certificate? But that was more of a joke.
So if you come to the SSHM working group tomorrow, I'm going to be presenting on the certificate format. So which is not X509.
Yeah, fair enough.
And you're going to learn way more about it than you really want to.
Cool.
So.
All right. Thanks a lot.
As long as it's not just straight ASN1, So is anything happening with SSH3?
So there was a proposal last year to basically tear up the entirety of the SSH transport protocol and replace it with, I believe, HTTP over QUIC. It was, I think, confusingly named SSH3 because it bore very, very little resemblance to SSH except in its user interface. I don't know. That's not something the working group's chosen to work on. The charter is to look at standardising things that we have and incremental improvements on the existing protocol. I think there is some desire to make more deep modifications to the protocol to modernise it. For example, SSH negotiates ciphers and message authentication separately. And has authenticated encryption as kind of a bolted-on afterthought. These days we tend to think purely in authenticated encryption. Can we fix that? Can we make other changes? I think we should get through some of the backlog of existing stuff first and get some sort of consensus and expertise around, thinking about the protocol, making informed interventions into it. There has been some proposals to run the existing transport protocol over the quick record layer. I think that's an interesting avenue. That has a bunch of nice properties from the network, without losing a bunch of the tooling and other stuff that you get with it. Tara.
Yeah, actually, if you think about the most important thing in SSH currently is the user authentication infrastructure. And that's one of the things that is, if you think about HTTP, is completely different, and we would lose all of that if you start to use that one. I'm not sure if it actually can even survive that, even if you just replace the first level, the crypto with the quick and then run user interface on that would probably still work. But the question is there really need for that? There is certain things that would be, especially in the key exchange, that would be, as you explained, that would be useful. But I think we'll be talking about 2.1, not 3.0. I think that would be,
Yeah, and that was my big concern with that SSH v3 thing. It was like there's analogs for a lot of the things that a lot of the authentication methods that the current protocol does, but they're not the same. And everyone has to kind of learn how to use X509 certificates. I didn't really go into it earlier, but SSH kind of pioneered the trust on first use model for a lot of things, for host authentication, which you could love it or hate it, but it's useful. It has its place, I think, and was, I think, one of the first systems to offer user manageable public key authentication in a very kind of human friendly form.
So about that trust model, that's actually one of the things that people are talking about. Back to the history, there's quite a lot of people who actually misunderstand what the trust model is. And this is actually implemented badly in some of the implementations out there. So the original idea was, this brings up to the RSH, command, meaning the command line interface. The host name you type into the command line is the key that is the database key for the public key of the remote end. And you have to type it exactly the same way. That's how you are not supposed to do any kind of mashing up. You are not supposed to do any DNS queries or anything like that. You are not supposed to convert to the IP address. You are always supposed to take exactly a string that user types in, because that's what he's expecting to be happening. That's what the authentication token is going to be. And then you do the database search and check out if the host name is same. I have been lately getting, all kind of things that if I have a host that has like 10 IP addresses, and if I happen to log in from different, side of the firewall, I get warning saying that IP address has changed. What the fuck that means? I don't care if the IP address changed. I care only about the fact that the host is same. And this is something, but of course in Windows environment, and that kind of thing is completely different. And that's actually, I also talk about when we were saying that the most common implemented file transfer protocol is, version 2. I think actually it is because almost all of the Windows versions I have seen implement actually the latest versions, because that was one of the reasons it was extended, because the Windows people wanted to have things that are useful for them. And so I was actually looking at that one point and wrote this at, I think almost all of the Windows versions support the latest, version of the draft.
Yeah, I think so Windows picked up a forked OpenSSH a few years ago. Started forking OpenSSH a few years ago. I think the version they're shipping might be a couple of years old, but it's relatively modern. And I never thought that I'd grow up to be a Windows developer, transitively at least.
Not on purpose. That's it. That's a great picture.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me do the HPKE stuff next. HPKE. What do you want to do next? Well, yeah. So the next thing we have is open mic, but what I would like to do first is we had a note on the list from Richard Burns and Martin Thompson about potentially doing a little bit of work on HPKE. So we would like to address that first before we do the regular open mic, if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah. Hi, I'm Richard Barnes. So I think as I put on the mailing list, there was some discussion in CFRG of hybrid chem combiners, PQT, post-quantum traditional hybrid combiners, and it became apparent there that HPKE and getting. Oh, okay.
Are you going to make them come up front? Sure, why not? Even though we told them no. Overruled.
Impromptu presentation time. Hello, everybody. So it became apparent in the CFRG discussion earlier this week that HPKE and getting HPKE to post-quantum security was a priority for a bunch of folks. And there's also been some discussion of some confusion over HPKE being an informational draft. And there's some other standards groups in particular that were wondering, emailing me and asking when are you guys going to convert this into a standard? And I literally said to them, we weren't going to. And then I changed my mind this week and said, maybe we should. So the charter we sent out to the mailing list basically does those two things. It says we should charter a quick little working group to do two things. It should republish HPKE as a proposed standard with a couple of minor changes that are listed in the charter to reflect lived experience. And the other task is to define some post-quantum cipher suites. And there's an enumerated set in there so that we can keep it focused. A couple of PQT hybrids and a couple of pure PQ ones. Are we sharing the chart? Okay. This is the next thing.
Wait.
So ADs, I'm not sure what exactly the process is for getting this chartered. Hopefully we can do it quickly without a BOF. But
We can absolutely do it without a BOF. You don't need a BOF to charter a working group.
So do we need a formal adoption call on the SAAG list, or?
Yeah, you need to have consensus, right? So we need to have, pardon? Somebody, so we need to have consensus, and as soon as we do that, we can set up a charter and we can get the charter agreed on the SAAG list and put it through the ISG.
Okay.
Yeah, and we will, of course, coordinate with CFRG, right? So
Of course, yeah.
we're not doing anything in this area without CFRG.
Oh, yeah. To be clear, Martin and I developed this charter in collaboration with CFRG
Right.
chairs. And so I think this is intended to not be like stealing stuff out of CFRG, but instead being harmonious with kind of the vision of CFRG that was articulated by the CFRG chairs in that meeting. In particular, the part where they want to focus more on the research angles and providing guidance to the working groups and leave the engineering more to the IETF. Thompson?
Yeah, time to hand it across, I think. This is now at the point where it's basically engineering. The work on chem combiners that's done in the CFRG is very useful. We'll definitely be using that, but this is a concrete instantiation that will be informed by that work, and that part is just engineering work. So I was just getting up to point out that the way that we test whether the IETF has consensus around a charter is we have the last call about the formation of the working group. I would expect that there's a bit of discussion on this, I guess in this case, the SAAG list before we get to that point, so that we're not going to be surprised at that point by someone objecting to it.
Right,
that's
so
all.
any charter goes through internal review first, and then it gets put out onto the last call list and last call.
Right.
And then it's approved.
Yeah.
We did, recently we did SSHM this way, right? We didn't have a BOF for that working group.
Mhm.
We developed a charter, we did the internal review, we put it out for IETF last call, and we did the external review.
Yeah, and that's a great process, and it can work pretty quickly. So
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
advocating for let's do that.
As long as there's consensus within the security area, we are happy to do that.
Okay, so should we be looking for a consensus call from you guys or a call for feedback, or should we just keep everyone keep sending in their happy thoughts and or their
You can
concerns.
send your happy thoughts for the moment because we are at the end of a very long meeting week and we would like to have a little bit of time to coordinate with CFRG just to make sure that we have all the I's dotted and T's crossed.
Hi, Sean Turner. So the history may have changed. Richard, you and I have talked about this. It's not like I'm bum rushing you. But the reason why we didn't standardize this stuff is because it's a dumpster fire of working groups coming up with their own crypto, right? And then trying to get it standardized and then like falling on our faces. Now I realize this is different because it's been looked at by the CFRG and they've kind of like blessed it. But I think we have to make sure that we put pretty strong guardrails on just not making working groups to standardize the one thing that's super hot that 3 people think is great that hasn't had extensive review, because then we're not doing anybody a good service. So just thought I'd say that piece.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of the reason this feels okay is because HPKE has had that similar level of review that we demand of TLS 1.3 and MLS. It's had those sort of formal validation. And I think those prior examples are what kind of give me confidence here, because those are examples of having done fairly cryptographically intensive work in working groups, but also having done the proper analysis there. All right.
David Skenazy. So you're saying you want the happy thoughts or you don't want the happy thoughts?
We do. I thought you were an enthusiast though.
Oh, absolutely. HPKE enthusiast. Anytime. So we recently deployed OHTTP in our privacy proxies at Google. And it would be nice to be able to do post-quantum security there. I saw the charter on the list. I think it's great. I think it's very tightly contained to avoid the pitfalls that Sean mentions. So I'm really supportive of this happening. I think we can get it done, and we would implement, use it, and I'm happy to offer reviews for this work.
Thanks, David.
So I think why I think this is actually a good thing that we could actually do it here is because this is existing CFRG, document that we're just doing maintenance on. Because CFRG, it's not research anymore when you are actually doing maintenance. So that's why I think it belongs. It could be done here in IETF, but that's why we don't want to open, any new crypto to be done in IETF, because immediately when we start to be, somebody had to be cryptographer to understand things, then we lose we don't have enough expertise here to actually do that. So we're usually saying that, yes, you are allowed to have a plus, minus, and even multiplication, symbols in there, but only with the powers of 2. If you have anything else, then you probably need to have, then it starts to be found in like a research paper or something like that.
Thanks, Jack. Chris?
Chris Wood, yeah, I already chimed in on the list with support for this. I think it's great. It's a very good opportunity to remove some of the cruft that we have in HPKE as well. It was floated that we have a bunch of pieces that aren't actually used in practice, and removing them would be fantastic. So yes, we should definitely do this. It's kind of long overdue.
Yeah, one thing that Richard didn't mention in the introduction was that the goal would to be maintain 100% compatibility for those things that are actually used. The pieces that we keep, if we drop something, everything else needs to remain 100% compatible.
For sure.
And that's in the proposed charter. I think that's very important. Some people have talked about version 2, which would potentially be incompatible, and I don't think anyone really wants to deal with migrating to a new format at this point.
I'm referring specifically to the auth modes, which are not really used in practice. Yeah.
Yeah, they're not interoperable anyway, so because no one implements them.
So Chris said what I was going to say, which is that I like the idea that the maintenance here includes dropping stuff that's not being used, in particular those auth modes. So I think that's a good bit of maintenance. Thanks for proposing that.
Thanks. All right.
So what I will say is if you do disagree with the idea of doing this and you don't want to publish it on the open list, you are welcome to email the security area directors.
So I'm very curious. When you say short time, Richard, what do you think?
Have you met Richard Barnes?
I know. We work together a lot, actually.
I already dropped the 0.0 draft.
Right. Okay. So you're thinking like the end of the year.
Like we have the GitHub work set up
By
already.
Madrid.
So like
if
I
you're
was
doing
thinking like
maintenance
maybe we could be basically done by the next IETF. Like we're going to be IETF process bound.
All right, cool. All right, cool.
But so the charter will take, like, it does take time to get the charter through the, like, it's 2 cycles of the ISG, right? So you can't completely spin on a dime, right?
Yeah.
But you can try.
But you know, while that's going on, we can be writing PRs
Yeah,
and have those ready to go, and have the
Right.
doc, you know, have things queued up for the working group to do as soon as we're ready to go. All right, so yeah, please send happy thoughts, but also any concerns anyone has. We want to hear those. We want to make sure those are addressed. Get those out on the SAAG list, and let's do this.
Thank you. Oh, hello.
Hi, yeah, I've been doing a lot of work on DNS handles and basically ways of moving pieces of information around in a more convenient fashion. And one of the things I'm very focused on is JS contact, which is basically vCard in JSON. And it strikes me that that would be a very good way of taking all of a user's crypto credentials, putting them into one place, and then that's a blob that we can manage going forward. So I can give somebody a blob that is all the stuff that you need to know how I sign my code, SSH into a repo or whatever. And so we're looking at some updates to the JS contact format to make this a bit more fluent. At the moment, you can put keys in there, but the PGP key doesn't say what it's for. It doesn't say I'm a PGP key for this email address, so we're fixing some of that. And I'd like folk, I need folk who are experts in SSH, PGP, and SMIME, etc., as deployed to help in this, so that the idea is if we can have a contact where you can pull somebody up in the address book, click on them, and then get an end-to-end secure communication with them out of a regular JS contact app. So I'm looking for collaborators.
So if you would be doing that work, what would the home be for that work? Would it be wherever JContact now is?
For that particular piece, that will be calendar extensions, which is also homed with JMap. I will be coming with a sec art dispatch piece for some other stuff related, but that particular part will be Calyx.
This is Richard Barnes again. Rich Sauls reminded me of a very important aspect of my answer to Sean's question about speed, which is that Rich asked me if we were going to be done in one cycle, and I bet him a jamón ibérico that we would not be meeting in Madrid. So we have some real stuff writing this, some real incentives in play to get this work done.
Oh. Money where your mouth is. Yeah, Stephen's right.
Open my camera. Hi. Hi, everyone. I'm Flo Driscoll, UK NCSC. This isn't about Hamon Iberico, so it's just fundamentally less interesting than the last point. But I guess I just wanted to flag, so earlier in the week, we had the PQC dialogue with government stakeholders. And at that meeting, Michael from NCSC mentioned that NCSC were going to have some guidance on timelines for PQC migration coming out. I basically just wanted to flag that they came out this morning. So people in the room who are sort of interested in different national guidelines on migration timelines, I'll put it in the chat. But yeah, the UK have now got something published. As well as the timelines, the other thing I wanted to flag is that in that guidance, one of the things that's mentioned is that we really see this as like, we don't want this just to be kind of government shouting into the wind. We really see this as a whole ecosystem change. So kind of 2 things in particular. One is that we're soon going to be looking for consultancies. We're going to be announcing a program for consultancies to go and kind of give guidance on migration. And the other thing is that we're really keen to see publications of experiences of migrating to PQC from like the really big companies to smaller ones. So hopefully that's kind of of interest to various people in IETF. Yeah, any questions? happy to take them offline, or there are NCSC people in the room who can answer them as well. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Hi all, I'm David Venuk, mostly here from the NTP working group at the moment. Within that context, we're currently not doing as much interesting stuff with post-quantum. Sorry for those who are mostly interested in that. But we're working on the security of PTP, which uses HMAX in its security model. And in that context, we're looking towards getting a list in place of algorithm identifiers for HMAX. And I was wondering if there is any guidance on whether such a list already exists elsewhere, and if not, if there's interest in making something for this similar to the authenticated encryption and associated data algorithm list that already exists within the IETF and IANA ecosystem.
Do you know this? Do you know this? Does Sean know this?
Hi, this is Sean Turner. There's multiple hash algorithm registries, so you kind of get to pick yours. I'll dig through the IANA registries and I can give you a pointer to where one of them exists already. You can either start there or, take it over, because I don't think it's used much.
Okay, that's good to know. If you could send me that, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, Simone Onofri from W3C. Just an announcement.
Can you speak a bit closer on the mic?
Okay. So Simone Onofri from W3C. So we just would like to ask all of you, also in collaboration with Paul and Web, the review of web authentication, because we are approaching the level 3 version, and as per your charter, we would like to ask review to the SecDir. So a message will follow.
That's great. When you send us the information, we will put it out to the SAAG list.
Okay, thank you so much.
So we can see who, yeah. Thank you very much. We're going to set you free for cookies. If there's cookies, you think there's cookies?
I haven't seen cookies. Hot cookies. Meat on a stick.
Cookies aren't good for you? Oh, too bad. Okay, all right. But anyway, you're free to go. Thank you very much. Have a good travels home, please.